Hi, it's Corey with Freedom Investing Group. And today I'm going to talk about deals that we have backed out of when we've already been under contract and why. What drove us to back out. So to date, there's only been two of those. I do kind of have pride in the fact that we try to, when we're going to put a property under contract, we try to do a bunch of due diligence ahead of even putting it under contract and ask a bunch of questions up front. Because I never want to back. If I put something under contract, I want to do it with the intent of closing. I know as the seller, I get really frustrated when other buyers will come and talk a big game, and then you put it under contract. They don't do any due diligence. This happened multiple times to me. They don't do any due diligence, and they wait till like a day or two before the DD deadline, and then they come back with some crazy lowball offer and say, "Never mind, the numbers didn't work." And it's like, well, why didn't you run the numbers before you made the offer? Nothing has changed. I'm very upfront with all my stuff when I'm selling something. I try to be honest. So I try to flip that on its head and say, when I'm a buyer, I try to understand the numbers ahead of time. I try to ask as many questions as I can, so that there's no surprises that come up. And then in due diligence, I'll do a bunch of confirming everything that we've been told and checking a whole bunch of other things. But I try to ask those big deal breaker questions up front, as much as possible. But sometimes you still find something that doesn't work. So the two properties that we have backed out of, I'm not going to name them because I don't want to cause any issue with the current owner. But one of them was in a great metro, great location, surrounded by kind of really nice looking neighborhoods with little McMansion things. Great looking area. It's an older park, but great location. We ran test ads, but before we put on a contract, we ran test ads. The demand seemed strong. The park itself was mostly tenant-owned homes. We actually noticed that there was one kind of little fishy thing that we noticed was that there was in Google Maps, it appeared there were more pads than the seller was listing it as. So we weren't quite clear on that, and their explanations were kind of wishy-washy on why that was. It was a little hard to understand, but that's okay. We figured, well, maybe there's some extra pads here or something. And so we put it under contract. We started to move forward. We sent an email to all of our friends and family investors saying, "Hey, we've got this thing under contract. It looks really cool. The location's great. And we're doing due diligence." And then come to find out the reason why there were all those empty pads that weren't listed was that the city that it was in a really contentious relationship with the owner. And I think the city was actually overstepping their bounds. The status of the park was legal non-conforming, which means that it was grandfathered in. It was built there before the zoning ordinances were in effect. And so effectively it was non-conforming to the current zoning ordinances, but it was there first. So legally they can't enforce new zoning ordinances on an existing property. That's called legal non-conforming or grandfathered in. But the city seemed like they were kind of overstepping their bounds and trying to enforce those zoning ordinances. So the city had basically said they were not going to issue a permit to install any new homes until the park was up to all the current zoning. And the zoning was so restrictive that you would have to rip all the mobile homes out and turn it basically into a McMansion neighborhood in order to comply. I mean, it was like the size of the lots was massive. The size of nothing would fit on the property, the size of the yards. Nothing would fit. And so they weren't, not trying to expand the park or anything, but usually you can at least swap out homes like for like. And I would imagine, I'm not a lawyer, I don't know, I would imagine that somebody could come into this park and hire a municipal attorney and maybe battle the city a little bit, and have a good chance at least being able to replace homes. You know what I mean? I mean, you would think the city would want that. So you could take out some old, instead of just trying to limp the old ones along, you could take out the old homes and bring in newer ones and make the park nicer, right? Like I would think they would want that, but apparently not. And so effectively what it made it was a dying park. Like every time you're going to have a home that's no longer habitable, you can fix it and fix it and fix it. But if you ever have to take one out, or if a fire burns one down or whatever, every time one of these things gets yanked out, you just have another empty pad that can never be filled. It's a park where the occupancy is just going to go down and down and down and down and down. And so we weren't willing to go to we didn't have the stomach for a big legal fight with the city. I mean, the price was good, but it wasn't that good to justify all that with an uncertain outcome where you don't even know if you're going to win that fight. And it just sounded not fun at all. And so that was one that we backed out of. We didn't go back and try to retrade or renegotiate the deal. We just kind of said, hey, sorry, like this is not what we signed up for. So that was one. And then the other one was a park actually in the same general region. This was an older park, mostly tenant-owned homes. At first, we were excited because it was near another park that we own, and it was mostly tenant-owned homes. We're like, man, there's going to be economies of scale with the management. We've already got the vendors in the area figured out. Seems like a cool location once again. The location seems strong. But once we got into due diligence, we realized that it was on private well water, and it had been previously on septic, but they converted it. So it was actually city sewer, but private well water, and you couldn't convert to city water. We found out, and it's fine. We have parks that are well and septic, and if they're up to up to par and conforming with all the different regulations and everything, if they're totally up and running and in conformance, then we're fine with that. And we just factor in the maintenance instead of the water costs. And it can be a more cost-effective system than city water, actually. But you have to set aside for CapEx. In this case, the thing was not conforming. There was all kinds of letters with the state EPA with things they needed to upgrade. And it was out of conformance and everything. And the upgrades, we started to talk to some contractors for quotes, and it seemed like it was going to be $600,000 or $700,000 of upgrades on a park. I forget what we were under contract for, 1.4, 1.3, 1.4, somewhere in there million. So, I mean, a massive CapEx that the thing needed. And the owner was like, no, the thing's working. The thing's working fine. Why do we need to do anything? They were not willing to talk owner. We kind of said, hey, we did another park recently where we bought a park where it did need an upgrade on the water system, but we got a gigantic $480,000 credit from the seller for that repair. And that's what made the deal still pencil and make work. Like, it looks like you need $600,000 or $700,000 of work. This is very similar work. We can't, our numbers don't work. This was not in our initial offer. We were not assuming a $700,000 CapEx expenditure. So that was the other one where we just couldn't come to terms with the seller on that. We kind of said, hey, if you can give us a credit for this work that needs to be done, the state EPA is saying it needs to be done, then we'll still go forward. But they weren't interested in that. And they were kind of just like, the state EPA, those guys don't matter. You don't have to do that. It's like, well, I want to have a conforming system. I don't want to, I'm not going to mess with that. So anyway, so that was the other one that we did unfortunately back out of. Even though otherwise it seemed like it was a nice community. It was mostly tenant-owned homes. It was older homes, but nice. Anyway, all the other ones we've been able to close on, those are the two that we backed out of. I feel pretty passionate about the fact of just trying to understand things as much as you can before you even go under contract. Make sure, like, is the price right? Do the numbers really make sense? Is there any deal breaker here? It saves us time, right? So we don't have to do a bunch of due diligence and spend time and money on stuff that we're just going to back out of. It saves the seller time because they don't want us dragging them down the road only to bail. And so anyway, so I feel pretty passionate about that topic. So hope that's a fun one. Hope you're having a great day. Cheers. Of course, how do I stop the recording? I'm going to trim that.